She wasn't supposed to be part of the story. But her name, Nichol Kessinger, became the secret the world couldn't stop whispering. The man she fell for wasn't single. The family he smiled with on social media was still very much alive. And within days of meeting her, that perfect family would vanish, leaving behind a trail of lies, data, and unanswered questions that still haunt America. Police found the bodies. Courts found the killer. But what they never found was the full truth about her. This is the story that was hidden in plain sight. August 13, 2018. Frederick, Colorado. It's 5:27 a.m. and the neighborhood is still. Streetlights hum in the quiet. Inside one of those homes, a mother of two, nearly 15 weeks pregnant, is supposed to be getting ready for the day. But by sunrise, everything will stop. Police will later arrive after a friend grows concerned. The doors are locked. The beds unmade. The house feels frozen, as if time paused sometime before dawn. A purse on the counter. A phone still plugged in. A child's blanket left folded at the foot of a couch. To the officers, it looked like an ordinary home, until they noticed what was missing. Hours later, the husband will walk in, speaking carefully, explaining calmly. His tone will unsettle the investigators watching from the doorway. They'll sense that something is off, but they won't yet know why. For days, the nation will follow the search, the smiling family photos, the heartfelt pleas, the mystery that makes no sense. But what the public didn't know then was that another name, hidden deep within phone records and search histories, was about to change everything they thought they knew. This is not just the story of a family lost. It's the story of secrets buried inside everyday lives, and the woman whose presence was almost erased from the official record. Before we continue, if you believe real investigations like this matter, help keep them alive. Hit subscribe, tap like, and share this documentary so more people can see what others tried to forget. And tell us, where are you watching from? Because no matter where you are tonight, this story reaches far beyond Colorado. For years, the Watts family home in Frederick, Colorado, looked like a portrait of modern happiness. The walls were covered with photos of smiling faces, Shannon, energetic and proud, Chris, quiet and devoted, and their two young daughters, Bella and Celeste, always in matching outfits. Every detail spoke of stability. Shannon's social media was her canvas, carefully curated videos of family life, motivational posts, and moments of joy. To thousands watching online, she seemed unstoppable, a woman who worked hard, adored her family, and built her life with purpose. But behind those bright videos, something had shifted. Chris, once attentive and affectionate, had grown silent. Friends noticed he no longer looked at Shannon the same way. Texts from Shannon to her closest friends revealed her confusion. She felt him slipping away but couldn't understand why. What she didn't know was that at his workplace, another connection was quietly forming, one that would unravel everything. Her name was Nichol Kessinger. To those who knew her, she was intelligent, efficient, and private. She worked as an environmental contractor for Anadarko Petroleum, the same company where Chris worked as an operator. At first, their conversations were professional. But by early summer 2018, their interactions had turned personal, first a friendly spark, then something deeper. Nichol later told investigators she thought Chris was a single man preparing to finalize a divorce. She said she had no reason to suspect otherwise. But the truth written in her phone's memory told a different story. Long before she ever met Chris face to face, her digital trail revealed an unexplained curiosity. Investigators would later uncover that she had searched for Chris Watts and Shannon Watts months earlier, as far back as 2017. These weren't random searches. They were time-stamped, archived, and verified by forensic analysts. When questioned, Nichol insisted she had no memory of it, claiming she didn't even know Shannon's name until after the tragedy. That claim directly contradicted the data. What did those early searches mean? Were they harmless coincidences, or signs of prior knowledge that she couldn't explain away. Investigators noted her answers were strangely careful. She didn't deny, she deflected. She often said she couldn't recall, as if afraid that the wrong word might reopen a door she wanted to stay closed. While Chris's secret life deepened, Shannon was doing everything she could to hold her family together. In June 2018, she left Colorado with her daughters to spend several weeks in North Carolina with her parents. She hoped the time apart would help. From her family's home, she sent messages to Chris full of affection, trying to pull him back toward the life they had built. She told friends she believed space would remind him of what mattered most. But the space only widened the distance. Alone in Colorado, Chris was changing. He began working out obsessively, adjusting his diet, and spending long hours texting someone who wasn't his wife. While Shannon posted family updates online, he was spending evenings with Nichol, going on dates, staying at her apartment, and exchanging hundreds of private messages. Their connection grew intense and secretive. Nichol would later describe their relationship as casual. But her own search history painted another picture. She had looked up wedding dresses, spent hours reading about men leaving their wives for their mistresses, and browsed websites about starting over. To investigators, these searches suggested emotional investment, a woman envisioning a future that didn't include Shannon or the children. Yet Nichol presented herself as detached, even altruistic, claiming she urged Chris to fix his marriage. The contradiction between her words and her digital footprint was impossible to ignore. By early August, Shannon still believed there was hope. She texted a friend that she and Chris had talked and that things felt better. She was determined to protect her family, even if she had to carry that hope alone. Meanwhile, Nichol was deleting messages, clearing her history, and carefully managing what investigators would later call a pattern of digital concealment. When Shannon boarded her flight back to Colorado on August 12, she had no idea how much her world had changed. The husband waiting at home was not the same man she had left weeks earlier. His emotions were elsewhere, his loyalty divided. And at the center of that transformation stood Nichol Kessinger, the woman whose involvement would ignite one of the most controversial debates in modern criminal history. By the time Shannon's car pulled into the driveway that night, two stories were already running side by side, one of love and loyalty, the other of secrecy and deception. The illusion of the perfect family was about to fracture forever. In the days that followed, investigators would uncover a series of hidden calls, erased searches, and deleted texts that revealed what no one had seen, how deep Nichol's involvement really went, and how digital footprints can expose even the best-kept secrets. By mid-August 2018, public attention was fixed on the Watts home, cameras, neighbors, and investigators all circling a house that once symbolized perfection. But while the world waited for answers, detectives turned their focus toward a far quieter setting, a phone, belonging to Nichol Kessinger. When Nichol first walked into the police station, she seemed nervous yet willing. She told investigators she wanted to help, that she had already ended things with Chris, that she knew nothing about his family's disappearance. Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed. But as technicians began examining her phone, the story she told and the story her device revealed were miles apart. The first anomaly was subtle, fragments of erased history. Texts missing, images wiped, browser caches cleared within hours of the murders. The deletions were not random, they followed a pattern. Each erased line coincided with moments when the investigation intensified. It was as if she were scrubbing away every trace of emotional proximity to Chris, hoping to reset her digital life before investigators caught up. Among the data they managed to recover were searches that painted a striking picture of Nichol's state of mind. In early August, just days before Shannon returned home, Nichol spent hours online browsing wedding dresses and reading forums about whether a man would leave his wife for his mistress. Later, she Googled how long it took for text messages to be traced, and how investigators could retrieve deleted data. These weren't idle curiosities. They were survival questions, typed by someone suddenly aware that her digital world had become evidence. When detectives asked why she deleted so much, Nichol said she panicked. She didn't want to be seen as the other woman. But investigators were unconvinced. The timeline didn't fit. The deletions began before Chris's televised plea for his family's safe return. It suggested she wasn't reacting to public backlash, she was preparing for it. Then came the data that no one could ignore. At 6:16 a.m. on August 13, the very morning Shanann and her children disappeared, Nichole's phone pinged a tower near the Watts residence in Frederick, Colorado, an area completely out of her normal range. Forensic analysts confirmed that in the months of records reviewed, her phone had never pinged near that location before, and never did again afterward. When confronted, she called it a cell tower mistake. But experts found no similar errors in the surrounding network. Even more suspicious, Nichole's phone went almost entirely silent afterward. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., there were no calls, no texts, no app usage, 8 hours of digital silence from a woman who, in every previous day on record, rarely went more than 40 minutes without using her phone. That afternoon, when her phone activity resumed, the first calls she made were not to friends or family, but to her spiritual advisor, an older man linked to a private organization known for its teachings on energy and transformation. The timing was so specific, so deliberate, that detectives flagged it. They wondered whether Nichol was seeking comfort, or guidance on what to do next. Later that same night, a chain of calls between Chris and Nichol revealed something even stranger. Starting around 11 p.m., the pair spoke 4 times, each conversation overlapping with key moments when detectives were trying to reach Chris themselves. Logs showed that while Chris was on his work phone speaking with an investigator, Nichol called his personal phone for precisely the same duration. 11 minutes. Exactly. Analysts reconstructed the pattern and proposed what many now call the three-way theory. The idea that Chris had placed the detective on one line and Nichol on another, allowing her to silently monitor the conversation. It was a theory that explained the repeated call drops, the identical time stamps, and Chris's sudden shift in tone once the connection stabilized. When detectives later asked Nichol about those calls, she said she couldn't recall what they discussed. Her answer, once again, was vague. But the metadata didn't forget. It showed coordination, not coincidence. By the time the FBI completed its digital analysis, the contradictions were undeniable. Nichol had told investigators she ended contact with Chris once she learned his family was missing, yet the phone records showed continued communication well after that. She claimed she deleted data out of embarrassment, yet she began wiping her device before the story even reached national headlines. She said she had no connection to the events of that morning, yet her phone was there, briefly but unmistakably, at the edge of the Watts neighborhood. Each fact, viewed alone, might have been dismissed as chance. But together, they formed a map of deceit that pointed directly back to her. Still, the most puzzling element wasn't technical, it was human. Through every interview, Nichol maintained a composed front. She cried when prompted, expressed remorse for being fooled, and told agents she wanted the truth as much as anyone else. Yet her words never quite matched her actions. Investigators could feel it, she wasn't panicking like someone blindsided, she was calculating, choosing every sentence with surgical care. As the data piled up, the question was no longer whether Nichol Kessinger had secrets, but how many. When Chris Watts finally confessed, his admission was supposed to bring clarity. Instead, it opened an entirely new debate. His guilt was proven, but her role remained suspended in uncertainty, tethered to deleted files, missing messages, and a single 6:16 a.m. ping that refused to be explained. The confession would soon dominate headlines around the world. But behind the courtroom admissions and televised apologies, one puzzle persisted, a digital footprint that refused to vanish, belonging to the woman who said she simply fell for the wrong man. When investigators finished mapping the digital maze left on Nichol Kessinger's phone, one question remained unanswered: why? Every deleted message, every erased search, every phone ping pointed to a woman who wasn't just hiding, she was preparing. But preparing for what? To uncover motive, analysts went back through Nichol's digital history month by month, tracing her behavior before the murders. That's when they found something impossible to ignore. Long before Sean and Watts disappeared, Nichol had already searched her name, read her social media posts, and scrolled through images that announced Shanann's pregnancy. Public, cheerful posts about the baby boy she and Chris were expecting. So when Nichol told detectives she learned of the pregnancy only after it made national headlines, the claim collapsed. She had seen it already, not once, but several times. It wasn't new information. It was an inconvenient truth she chose to bury. The discovery reframed the entire relationship. A pregnancy meant permanence, a new beginning for Chris and his wife. But for Nichol, it represented a threat, the one thing that made her dream of a life with Chris almost impossible. Investigators kept digging, and what they found next drew a direct line between obsession and potential intent. In early August 2018, phone records showed Nichol calling a medical clinic. The questions she asked weren't about her own health. She wanted to know how much oxycodone could be taken safely, and how much could cause complications during pregnancy. A week later, during his eventual confession, Chris admitted that he had given Shanann a dose of oxycodone the night before the tragedy. He said it was to help her rest, though the statement came without medical context or prescription records. When detectives asked where the medication came from, Chris refused to say. "That's a secret I'll keep," he told them. To the FBI's Digital Forensics Unit, that silence spoke volumes. Nichol's inquiry and Chris's later confession were separated by only days. It suggested coordination, or at least conversation, between the two. What made the evidence more disturbing was its timing. Shanann had just returned from North Carolina, where she had fallen ill, severe cramps, exhaustion, nausea. Friends remembered her texting that she felt off, assuming it was stress. But with hindsight, the symptoms looked eerily consistent with the effects of the very drug investigators suspected had been discussed. Still, there was no direct proof, only a trail of phone records, internet searches, and the missing link of who supplied the medication. Without a confession from Nichol, the theory could never cross from suspicion to charge. Even so, detectives began to see a psychological pattern forming. Nichol often portrayed herself as the sensible voice in Chris's life, urging him to make his marriage work. But that image fractured when placed against her own search history. Hours spent looking at wedding gowns, apartments for two, and articles asking whether a man ever leaves his wife for his mistress told a different story. She wasn't just watching his life unravel, she was rehearsing the one she wanted to live. This contradiction, the caring advisor versus the secret planner, became central to her profile. Investigators described it as mirrored intent. Two versions of Nichol coexisting, the professional woman maintaining control, and the romantic idealist who believed she could rewrite someone else's family story. When the truth surfaced, Nichol's responses in interviews appeared carefully engineered. She cried when she needed sympathy, stressed her ignorance when evidence cornered her, and often redirected the conversation toward how the situation affected her. Rarely did she mention Shanann by name. The empathy that filled her public statements was missing behind closed doors. For investigators, this emotional distance was as revealing as any digital log. It suggested calculation, not confusion, an awareness of the stakes, not shock. Then came the final twist. In the days after Chris's arrest, Nichol called law enforcement repeatedly, expressing fear for her safety and asking that her name be kept out of reports. Within a week, she left her job at Anadarko Petroleum. Within a month, she vanished completely. No forwarding address, no social media presence, no trace. To some, that disappearance was self-preservation. To others, it looked like strategy, the final act of someone determined to outpace her own trail. The investigation into Chris Watts officially closed with his confession, but Nichol's story remained suspended in uncertainty. The evidence of her awareness, the unanswered questions about the drug inquiry, and her sudden vanishing created a lingering unease. She was never charged. Yet every recovered search, every erased file, and every silence in her interviews left a single impression: this was not the profile of an uninvolved bystander. Whether she helped plan, enabled, or simply ignored what was coming, Nichol Kessinger's connection to the Watts family story would forever remain the most controversial part of it, the quiet echo behind a tragedy that shocked the world. As Chris Watts faced sentencing, his words were supposed to close the case. But instead, they opened a new mystery, one defined not by violence, but by silence. A woman who once lived in plain sight had erased herself completely, leaving behind a single haunting question: what did Nichol Kessinger know, and when did she know it? When Chris Watts confessed, most people believed justice had been served. Overnight, the headlines shifted from search alerts to sentencing updates. The public exhaled, the case was solved. But inside the Weld County Courthouse, something else quietly happened. The moment Chris signed his plea deal, the investigation into everything, and everyone, around him stopped. In legal terms, it was efficient. In human terms, it was unfinished. The plea guaranteed a conviction, but it also erased the need to ask why. It ended the scrutiny into every name, every data trace, every contradiction that hadn't yet been explained, especially the woman whose name appeared in nearly every hidden folder of the case, Nichol Kessinger. The detectives had interviewed her just days after Shanann and the girls were reported missing. That interview, on August 16, should have been a pivotal moment in uncovering the full truth. But from the start, it felt restrained, almost careful. Nichol was not alone. Sitting beside her, her father. Calm, collected, occasionally interjecting. Not a lawyer. Not an investigator. Just there. But his presence altered the tone of the entire exchange. Standard procedure would have isolated Nichol for clarity, yet she remained shielded, her father's voice subtly guiding her responses. At one point, when investigators asked if she'd surrender her phone for analysis, she hesitated. Before she could answer, her father leaned forward, "It'll just confirm what she's already said." The detective nodded. The moment passed. By then, Nichol's phone had already been scrubbed, browser history cleared, deleted logs neatly overwritten. Investigators accepted the fragments she offered, fragments that painted her as a cooperative witness. It was only later that analysts discovered inconsistencies in her timeline, deleted searches, and unexplained pings. Yet none of those details were ever formally confronted again. The plea deal, prosecutors would later say, made it unnecessary. The timing of that plea was almost surgical. Chris confessed within days of failing his polygraph test, abruptly halting further questioning about Nichol's involvement. It gave the district attorney a clean case, one suspect, one motive, one conviction. But it also silenced the trail that pointed towards something far murkier: missing data, mixed motives, and an unexplored influence that might have reached far beyond the Watts home. And then there was her father. His name rarely appears in official documents, yet his shadow hovers over that interview like an unspoken authority. There were whispers, unconfirmed, but persistent, that he had ties to local law enforcement. Nothing ever proven, but enough to raise eyebrows among those who reviewed the case. It might explain the unusually protective tone of her interrogation, the absence of pressure, the lack of a follow-up. Nichol's digital footprint was vast. Deleted texts. Recovered fragments. And searches that didn't match her story. Yet after the plea, no subpoena was filed to retrieve backups from her cloud data. No reconstruction of her deleted history. In most investigations of this magnitude, such evidence would have been re-examined forensically, line by line. Here, it was simply archived and forgotten. When questioned years later about those discrepancies, prosecutors defended their approach. The confession answered the core questions, one official explained. But that's exactly what unsettled those who studied the case, the idea that core questions are enough when obvious ones remain untouched. Why was Nichol Googling Shanann's name months before ever meeting Chris? Why did her phone ping near the Watts home on the very morning of the crime? Why was her data wiped before her first police interview? None of those questions were pursued. None were even included in the official timeline. The confession had wrapped everything too neatly, and Nichol Kessinger quietly stepped out of the frame. Across social media, the vacuum of answers turned to obsession. Amateur investigators replayed footage, compared documents, magnified interrogation clips. They noticed what professionals had ignored: a nervous laugh, a misplaced word, a father's hand steadying his daughter's arm during questioning. Details small enough to be dismissed, yet collectively too strange to overlook. If there was a pattern of influence protecting Nichol, it worked flawlessly. She was never charged, never subpoenaed, and never heard from publicly again. Her name vanished from court records just as quickly as her online profiles disappeared. Some saw it as coincidence. Others saw it as control. But the truth, whatever it was, had been buried beneath a confession that came too fast, and an investigation that ended too soon. By the time the nation moved on, the story had already split in two: the official record, tidy, tragic, complete. And the public record, where fragments of deleted evidence and whispered theories kept the case alive. Nichol's silence only deepened the divide. She became both a mystery and a mirror, a reminder of how quickly justice can settle for enough when the full story is far from told. The confession may have ended the legal case, but it didn't end the curiosity. Because when institutions stop asking questions, the public starts, and what they found about Nichol after her disappearance would change how this story was remembered forever. When the official case files closed, the story should have ended. But instead, something remarkable began: a second investigation, this time not led by law enforcement but by the public. The day after Chris Watts was sentenced, search traffic for Nichol Kessinger surged worldwide. In forums, podcasts, and living room conversations, people asked the same question the justice system never answered: where is she? In the weeks that followed, Nichol seemed to dissolve. Her resignation from Anadarko Petroleum was confirmed. Her phone number was deactivated. Neighbors said a moving truck arrived one morning before sunrise, and by that afternoon, the apartment was empty. No forwarding address, no trace. For a woman who once lived a meticulously organized life, the speed of her disappearance felt deliberate. Then came the sightings. A woman resembling Nichol at a Denver coffee shop. Another in Oregon, using a similar middle name. None verified, yet each rumor spread like wildfire. Amateur sleuths began cross-referencing driver license databases, property records, and even LinkedIn profiles. Every false lead deepened the intrigue. Somewhere out there, people believed, Nichol was living under a new identity. By early 2019, the internet had turned the case into a digital hunt. YouTube creators built entire channels around dissecting her interviews. They slowed the footage, pausing on her nervous laugh, her shifting posture, the moment her father leaned in to guide her answers. Reddit threads expanded into sprawling timelines that filled hundreds of pages, theories about phone pings, deleted searches, and whether she had helped disappearing. One group even claimed to have located a woman matching her build in an out-of-state surveillance clip walking past a convenience store at dawn. Investigators dismissed it, but for millions of viewers online, it was the most gripping episode in a story that had never truly ended. As the obsession grew, the narrative around Nichol split into extremes. In the public imagination, she became both villain and victim. One side cast her as the calculating mistress who orchestrated everything and slipped away untouched. The other side portrayed her as a woman who fell into a relationship that destroyed her life and fled to survive the backlash. Between those versions was the truth, and perhaps that's why the fascination never faded. Media networks sensed it too. New documentaries reframed her role, each more speculative than the last. Headlines labeled her the vanishing woman. Producers invited behavioral analysts to decode her tone, her silence, her half-smiles. But no amount of analysis could fill the holes left by an investigation that had stopped too soon. Each unanswered question became a new episode, a new thumbnail, a new conversation. For psychologists and journalists covering the case, Nichol's disappearance tapped into something larger than the crime itself. In an era where everything is recorded, her ability to vanish felt almost supernatural. She had escaped the permanent footprint of the digital age, something few people ever manage. That paradox fascinated the world. A woman defined by her data became invisible precisely by erasing it. Meanwhile, the moral conversation deepened. Viewers debated whether Nichol deserved protection or exposure. Should someone who lied to investigators be allowed to disappear without consequence? Or was she another casualty of a story that consumed everyone it touched? The debate revealed an uncomfortable truth: society's need for closure often outweighs its capacity for empathy. By 2020, her name had become legend. "Where is Nichol Kessinger?" wasn't just a question, it was a cultural phenomenon. People claimed to dream about her, write songs about her, build theories connecting her to unrelated cases. Every few months, new proof surfaced. A photo, a voice message, a blurred reflection in a shop window, only to be debunked hours later. But the cycle never stopped. For many, the fixation wasn't really about Nichol at all. It was about control, the desire to find meaning in a tragedy that defied logic. When official answers felt incomplete, the audience took ownership of the narrative. The story evolved from a criminal case into a mirror of modern obsession, the way digital communities build myths out of unanswered questions. Years later, Nichol's location remains unknown. She has not appeared under her own name in any public record since 2018. Some believe she lives quietly under a new identity, others think she never left the country. What matters now is not where she is, but why the world still can't stop searching for her. Because the truth is, Nichol Kessinger became more than a person. She became a symbol, of secrecy, of complicity, and of the haunting space between innocence and guilt. The woman who once claimed she wanted to start over did exactly that. But in doing so, she became the one figure no confession could silence. The evidence may be circumstantial, but the fascination endures. 7 years have passed, yet every unanswered detail keeps the case alive, not in courtrooms, but in the collective imagination of those who still wonder what really happened when the cameras turned off, and Nichol Kessinger disappeared into history's shadows. The noise around the case eventually faded, the breaking news, the televised statements, the endless speculation. But what remained was silence. Not the kind that comforts, but the kind that unsettles. The kind that makes you realize something vital was never said. When investigators closed the file, they did it knowing pieces were still missing. A phone ping that didn't fit. A deleted message that was never retrieved. A name that quietly disappeared from every record. Those gaps became part of the case itself. Proof that even solved stories can stay incomplete. Nichol Kessinger's name has not appeared in any verified public document since 2018. Some believe she lives under protection, others claim she changed her identity and started over. Officially, there is no trace, not in property databases, not in employment records, not in photographs. It's as though she erased herself from the world that once couldn't stop talking about her. Meanwhile, Chris Watts remains in a maximum security facility in Wisconsin, serving life without parole. Over the years, he has given occasional interviews, each one slightly different from the last. New details appear, others disappear. His words often raise more questions than they answer, deepening the uncertainty that already defined this case. For the families left behind, the pain never truly settled. Shannan's parents continue to honor her memory, not through the headlines, but through the ordinary acts she once loved, community work, small gatherings, moments of care. Shannan, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico became symbols of what was lost, but they were also reminders of what love looks like when it refuses to fade. Still, for many who followed this story, the real weight lies not in what happened, but in what was left unfinished. The discovery files contained pages of data that never reached the courtroom, browser logs, deleted entries, conversations that hinted at a truth just beyond reach. Some say the plea deal ended a nightmare. Others believe it buried the rest of the truth with it. The silence that followed grew louder with each passing year. Online communities still dissect every second of footage, every line of testimony, searching for a missing connection. Their theories may differ, but they're all driven by the same instinct, that feeling you get when a story doesn't quite add up. Shannon once said in a recorded video that she believed, "Good things come to those who keep their faith." Today, that line carries a new kind of meaning. Her faith in love, in redemption, in honesty, all of it became the measure by which people still judge this case. It's what keeps her story alive long after the courtroom doors closed. As for Nichol, her absence has become part of the legend. She is both the unanswered question and the silence that follows it. Whether she hides out of fear, guilt, or exhaustion, no one truly knows. What is certain is that her story, or the lack of it, continues to shape how this tragedy is remembered. Because justice in court can end, but justice in conscience never does. Each missing answer, each unexplained action, leaves an echo that doesn't fade. The truth may have been recorded in documents, but the meaning of it lives on, in every conversation, every question, every viewer who still wonders how far the deception really went. If you believe stories like this deserve a second look, keep them alive. Ask what was missed. Question what was forgotten. Because somewhere between silence and truth lies the reason this story still holds the world's attention. The headlines have faded. The interviews have ended. But the questions remain, whispering through time, reminding us that some truths never die, they simply wait for someone brave enough to listen again. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Hit like to support this work and help more people see what truly happened behind the headlines. Comment below, what do you believe really happened? Should this case be reopened, or has justice already been served? We read every thought, every theory, every emotion you share. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because more investigations like this are coming. Real stories. Real people. Real truth. Your voice keeps this search for justice alive. Share this documentary, and together, let's make sure silence never buries the truth again.